So permaculture is really a framework. It's a framework in an evolving field based on dynamic observation, right? It is the observation of nature that is then applied to a specific problem to achieve solutions that bring abundance back into our lives. So to simplify, because I find, very often you get into the elevator pitch of what permaculture is, and 3 hours later you're having a beer or having a tea and you're still going on about what permaculture is. So really it is an ecological design science that's rooted in the observation of nature. And that's it. It can be applied to business design. It can be applied to architecture. It can be applied to garden design, organizational design, and interpersonal relationships, and any other way that you can apply patterns of nature to a problem. That's all that permaculture is. We see it mostly in food because food has been one of the biggest issues, and land management have been some of the biggest issues that we've been facing since the coining of this term. So what is permaculture? Well, we as humans have the least experience with how to live in the land, and thus we have the most to learn. We're really an adolescent species that is just beginning this journey of learning what it means to be a species on Earth today. So we need to go beyond that, and it's not just go for a walk in the woods and permaculture will come to you. There are tools that we use that are specifically put there to help us in understanding what to look for, how to apply that to a design, what specific strategies and techniques are out there in the forest that have proven themselves time and time again. And so these are the 12 principles of permaculture as one of the main tools that we use in design. And so we're going to very quickly go into them, not in ultimate detail. We do that in our fundamentals course and as well as in our permaculture design certification course. But when I do the 12 principles with applied solutions and things like that, it takes about half of a day. So we're going to do it very quickly just to get an idea of the base of the tool set. The first and foremost of all of these tools is to observe and interact. This is something that we find so difficult as humans, is to continue observing. We often will observe, see something of interest, and then begin planning and designing. This happens in our conversations with each other. Somebody says something really interesting that you have a fact about, or that you have a reply to, or you had an experience with, and you start formulating your response. And you fail to continue observing the remaining part of that conversation. So active listening and active observation are two of the big tools that we use in permaculture, whether you're looking at the land, whether you're looking at water, whether you're looking at soil, or speaking to each other or to the client. Catching and storing energy is really the mission of all life, is to catch the sun, catch the wind, catch the rain, catch nutrients, hold them and use them as much as possible, and then let them go into the production of a yield, which is the third of these principles. So producing either progeny or storage for winter survival, or seeds or fruit or something like that. So again, these tools are ones that we use as a checklist when we're evaluating your project. Is your project based in observation? Have you observed everything on your site for a year? We talk about minimum looking at property for a year before doing anything except maybe urgent fire and risk prevention. Catching and storing energy. Are all of your systems catching and storing energy, or is energy just slipping away? Are buildings falling apart? Is the rainwater rushing away? Is the fire load in the woods just building up to a risk level? Obtaining a yield. Is there something beneficial coming out of this? And then applying self-regulation is one of the core fundamentals of any ecosystem, is that the ecosystem in and of itself has the ability to self-regulate. So let's say, recently food prices have gone up quite dramatically. And normally, if you think about a forest ecosystem, if the branches of the trees have been hit with a drought and been hit with the forest has been hit with a drought and it needs more nutrients and more water to grow, it will send down more roots deeper into the ground looking for the aquifer, connecting with mushrooms and mycelium to go get more water from other areas. And so there's a direct response in that hierarchy of the way the tree works. But in our governments here today, we have a massive increase of food costs due to COVID, as well as due to climate change and all kinds of other issues. But do we have an immediate response of the government to increase accessibility to food banks, to increase accessibility to community gardens, to increase accessibility or subventions to greening your yard, or catching rainwater and preventing flooding in your own backyard? None of this is a direct response because the way that our government is designed is a top-down hierarchy rather than a connected hierarchy like you see in forests or in other ecosystems. So there's a lot to see when we look at self-regulation and feedback. There should be a way for these needs, when they arise at the social level in our government, to be able to seek and attain their solutions without it becoming a burden on the management, the core management team of our country. Looking at renewable resources is absolutely crucial, but even breaking the way that we understand what resource is, because we think of the sun as a renewable resource, we think of the wind as a renewable resource. Water is a renewable resource if you respect it and you don't pollute it. Humans are a renewable resource if you respect them and don't pollute them. If you support them and encourage them, they give back more, not just because they want to, but because it just flows out of them when you fulfill someone's needs. We can produce no waste because essentially waste is a term that was created by humans. And so everything in every system on Earth is eaten by something, right? And if it isn't eaten by any creature, you haven't looked at the mycelium yet. You haven't looked at the mushrooms yet. They are the final decomposers of everything. So no system in nature produces waste. It is all a input to some other system. And so if you're producing waste, it's because we're not connecting to other systems that could use that waste as an input. Working from patterns to details. If you have ever, arrived at a project, arrived at a problem, and you all of a sudden you see something that needs to be dealt with and you start doing it. You start getting into the detail, you start putting out the fire, dealing with, rather than stepping back and looking at what's causing the fire. Where is the water coming from? I'm trying to bail the boat and you don't find the hole that's actually the source of that water. And so many times, because we're problem solvers and we see the urgency, we move to that detail. But when you're in that detail, it's like blinders. You don't see the other things that you're having impact on or that are having impact on you. And so we need to make sure that when we are designing in permaculture, we pull back to the pattern level, we look around, take the global account of everything, and then go back and design our solution. And before applying it, pull back to pattern level again and make sure it connects well with all of the other elements. So there's a lot more to go into on that one, but really making sure that we don't get lost in doing too much detail. I've seen so many people build a farm that has 100 different permaculture things on it. Permaculture food forests and regenerative this and chicken tractor that and herb spiral here. And none of it's been connected together in an interconnected, integrated systems design because they never looked at the overall pattern of their land. So we want to integrate rather than segregate, which is leading directly off of that one, connecting all of our systems together so that the rainwater, it will, flushes out the gutters and then it fills up your rain barrel. And then when the rain barrel is full, it floods into the pathways of the garden. And then it moves through that garden into the ponds and makes sure the ponds are all full. And then at that point, it finally goes out into the river. And it's done many different connected elements throughout your system. Using small and slow solutions. Anyone here bought land recently or building a house recently, and you just want to plant all the trees this year. You buy way more trees than you can, and you realize you can only plant 15 trees in the time frame of bare root planting season. So it's better to start small. Better to be late a season, one more season ordering your trees and plant them all and have them all thrive than it is to plant all 1,000 trees on the first planting window and have most of them die. So small and slow solutions is another thing that we find very difficult because we see the urgency to move forward and fast. So use and value diversity, right? It's the marginal, it's the diversity, it's that ability of multiple different skills of our community to fulfill all of the needs of the challenges that we face moving forward. If we are all experts in soil, well, then no one's going to know how to take care of the water or the trees. If everyone is, farming, then no one knows how to design the technology. So there's so many different ways that we have diversity that is going to help us, but it's also in the diversity of our designs. So many times I've seen farms go through these massive transitions where they go and put cover crops down on 100 acres. And they think, this is going to be amazing for regeneration. And their cover crop is buckwheat over 100 acres. It's like, this is really just 2 monocrops. It's corn and buckwheat. There's no polyculture cover crop system there. The diversity is actually what produces these benefits because it's that interconnection between the two species, and then that result connecting to the result of the other two species. And so when we are designing cover crops, you can't even have an ecosystem behavior before we reach 6, 7, 8, 9 species. So without that, you've failed. You've missed that point. And so by not bringing diversity in because we want to simplify and have more control and have more understanding, we are actually causing more harm and more work for ourselves, like we do with fertilizing. You fertilize with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Well, you're missing 270 something minerals and micro trace nutrients that are also needed in the soil. And so you cause disease and insect problems based on the fact that you wanted to control those 3 main nutrients. So use the edges and value the marginal. When we look at the edge of a system where it's connecting to other systems, this is where we often see a lot of diversity, a lot of really interesting stuff. So that's a good place to start when you're observing. It's a really good place to get moving if you don't know where to go from there. And 12 is to creatively respond to change, which I feel like is probably one of the most used, not necessarily because you want to, principles out there, but we often have to roll with the punches. We often have to, learn to dodge when something comes at you. And that is just making sure that you are ready for change so that you can creatively respond to it. So these are some of the basic tools to get started. And it's not just about looking at those 12 principles and running out in the woods and observing and hoping it'll all come to you. When you're designing in permaculture, there's a whole toolkit. And we've broken these tools into really more concise step-by-step processes that we offer in all of our courses. So in our Permaculture Fundamentals course, which is a 30-hour online course, as well as our permaculture design certification, which is over 100 hours of content in total. We go into detail on the full process of observation. It's not just go look at trees. There's a whole actual step-by-step process, looking at the root cause of things, looking at the strengths and weaknesses through SWOT analysis, and analyzing the movement of energy through sector analysis, looking at how elements connect together with their functional analysis, looking at placement of elements to be efficient on placement, not just on what you think is the best spot for a garden or a beehive or a compost, but why and where does it go based on frequency of distance. Designing the priority of elements based on the needs of the ecosystem is another one, the designer's priority toolkit. And then the whole design process in and of itself is really a step-by-step clear design process that we go into. So if that's the kind of level of information you're interested in, I recommend you check out our Permaculture Design Fundamentals course or our Permaculture Design certifications. We have a part-time course in the spring, as well as an intensive 2-week course in the summer at the farm. But that's where we get into detailed design, step-by-step processes. And it's really, for a lot of people, when you begin designing in permaculture, we start just copy and pasting lasagna garden, companion planting, rain barrel. But if you want to look at how to design ecosystems that function and that thrive and that grow and reproduce together as a functioning system, then it's that next level that is going to be appropriate for you.